Hello and welcome to the Quadient first half year results conference call. My name is Dan and I will be your coordinator for today's event. Please note this conference is being recorded and for the duration of the call your lines will be on listen only. However, there will be an opportunity to ask questions towards the end of the call. If you require assistance at any time, please press *0 on your telephone keypad to be connected with an operator. I will now hand you over to the CEO of Quadient, Geoffrey Godet, to begin today's conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for joining this call to present Quadient's second quarter sales and first half results for the period ending July 31st, 2020. Just to confirm, I am Geoffrey Godet, CEO of Quadient. I will be joined today in this call by Christelle Villadary, our CFO, and by Laurent Faxi, our new head of investor relationship. Throughout this call, I will be referring to the presentation that can be downloaded from our website, which complements the press release we issued today after market close. So, starting with slide 3. As you have all experienced, COVID-19 has impacted our lives and our economies in so many ways. At Quadient, as you know, our first priority has been and continues to be to protect its employees and maintain a full continuity of service, obviously, for our customers. We already covered this at length in our previous presentations earlier this year. In times of crisis, I think the Quadient community and its teams truly exemplified our core values. I'm very proud of that, with a lot of dedication from everyone. So today, going in through our H1 financials and achievements, I will highlight that Quadient has proved very resilient, and it says very resilient in this difficult economic environment. We remain profitable. We have generated strong cash flow and maintain a very robust liquidity position. And more importantly, we kept on executing our strategy to continue our transformation and prepare for the future, for which we are uniquely well positioned to benefit from the acceleration of digitization and increase in e-commerce deliveries. So to go through our agenda, I will first give you an overview of our key achievements. Then together with Christelle, we will comment both on our operating and financial performance, and then provide you with an in-depth review of the multiple strategic initiatives we succeeded to implement across all of our solutions. And finally, I will share with you our guidance for the full year. After that, we'll be happy to take some questions. So moving to slide 5. I have always thought that in difficult times, that companies that have the opportunity to reveal themselves, and in particular their strengths. When the crisis started, we had already deeply reshaped our organization, and we were fully on track to deliver our strategic plan. During the crisis, and thanks to the effort of our team, we have demonstrated how strong our culture was, our agility, and our capacity to adapt ourselves and cope with this situation. Thanks to our highly recurring business model, we showed a good level of resilience in the first half of the year. We contained the decline in our sales at minus 12.8% on an organic basis and at minus 10.5% for our major operation. Our recurring revenue have greatly helped us mitigating the impact of the COVID-19 crisis. So if we look at it, their decline was limited to 5.9% on an organic basis and at a minus only 4.5% for a major operation. The good news is that starting from May, we have seen the beginning of a gradual recovery and supported in particular by business process automation and parcel lockers. On the financial side, thanks to a tight cost control, we have succeeded to generate cost saving of 23 million euros. Consequently, the impact of our lower sales on our current EBIT has been softened. We recorded a current income before acquisition related expense of 61 million euro. And I want to highlight here that our EBITDA margin reached 21.5%. And we generated a very robust free cash flow of 76 million euros, showing that our highly cash generative model has been preserved during this crisis. This helped us obviously end the quarter with a further improved liquidity position of 933 million euro at the end of July 31st, which is 35 million higher than at the end of January. Our leverage has slightly improved and remains very low at 0.8 times excluding leasing. On the business side, we had a very active semester across our four solution, and we relentlessly continue to execute our strategy even in this challenging environment. And among the several achievements I wanted to share with you today, I wanted to highlight the following. The first one is where we have launched several new innovative products, such as the light parcel lockers, a new series for franking machine, and a fully integrated document processing platform, cloud-based, which has already attracted more than 140 new clients since the launch. The second highlight is that in parcel lockers, we have entered into new markets, including in new geographies with the UK residential sector on the one hand, and new vertical segments in the US with the retail sector, and the latter being supported by a first landmark agreement with Lowe's. Probably you have seen very recently just the announcement. Maybe some of you don't know yet. It's a top, Lowe's is among the top 10 US retail chain. And this should lead us to the deployment of 1,700 lockers across all their stores in the US across the 50 states. And we also signed an additional new agreement with our existing partner, Yamato, through our JV in Japan, for 3,000 new lockers as part of that extension in our contract. The third one is in the field of customer experience management. We obviously secured several promising distribution partnerships. And lastly, we obviously kept reshaping our business portfolio with the divestment of the loss-making activity ProShip, as you already know now. And more recently, as of July, the promising acquisition of YayPay, a leading US fintech specialized in accounts receivable automation with an innovative cloud and SaaS platform. So as you can imagine, you've seen we've been very focused and continue to be very disciplined in our execution. And I believe it will positively contribute to our future. Lastly, I wanted to mention that we provided that the major economies obviously don't return into a severe lockdown mode. We feel a little bit more comfortable to share with you some guidance for the full year. We remain obviously prudent. We expect that our full year 2020 sales will decline at around minus 10% on an organic basis, implying improved revenue trend in H2, driven by the growth in BPA and parcel locker solution. With our ongoing tight cost management, we estimate current EBIT before acquisition-related expense should land between 135 and 145 million euro. And last but not least, we remain confident about our free cash flow generation as we expect it to exceed 100 million euro this year. Moving to slide 6. So, if we take into consideration the impact obviously of the crisis to our operation, the H1 performance reflected 3 different phases. The first one until mid-March, where we were in line with the business trend experienced last year, meaning that our 3 growth engines were more than offsetting the decline of mail-related solution and other legacy business. The second phase, which we discussed in May, that from mid-March, the lockdown measures have drastically changed the situation, severely restricting the sale of mail equipment, the consumption of consumables like the ink cartridge, and the provision of on-site services as well as license sales. In the meantime, we, I think, quickly put some decision to protect our profitability in place, and obviously also measures to preserve our cash generation. And I think more relevance and importance for us today, from the end of May, we started to enjoy the beginning of a recovery. And despite the social distancing measures that were still in place in the vast majorities of countries that we still operate into, business process automation and parcel lockers have been back to growth at the end of the first semester. Moving to slide 7. Our recurring business model with both software and subscription, as you know, our revenues on the one hand, and the leasing and rental revenue on the other hand, help to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 crisis. It's, I think, important that everybody appreciate that recurring revenue today accounted for 75% of our sales, and their decline was only limited to 5.9%. So as you can see on the chart, the gap between our H1 2020 and H1 2019 performance has remained fairly low since the beginning of the year. Subscription and maintenance fees, as well as rental income, benefited from an increase of both license and hardware base in the previous quarters. And we also benefited from an increase in new SaaS subscription, as work from home has been a favorite to use our digital solution. So on the other hand, we've seen some revenues that are based on usage or even some on-site services clearly affected by the lockdown during that period of time. Obviously, this is a different story on the right-hand side of the slide for our non-recurring revenue, which represents the remaining of the 25% of our revenue base. Non-recurring revenue went down by 28.3%, but as you could see on the graph, the gap versus last year has narrowed from June onward. The placement of new hardware equipment and sales on on-premise license were impacted by the lockdown, as you know. But on the positive side, this environment has boosted volume of parcels and has been favorable to contactless delivery services, which is good news for our parcel locker solution. The last thing that I wanted you to pay attention to on the information we shared on the chart is the improvement that we have seen from June has continued in August, which obviously bodes well for our H2 performance. We have added the performance by solution in August in the next slides as well, but I will not comment to it. So, moving to slide 9. After a first quarter at minus 10.9% on an organic basis, our sales went down 14.5% in the second quarter, leading to a decline of minus 12.8% in the first half of the year. Major operation did better at minus 10.5% only, reflecting a stable combined performance of our 3 growth engines, mostly driven by the parcel locker solution growth, and a 13.9% decline in mail-related solution. Additional operations suffered more at minus 28.9%. We had a very small negative scope effect due to the sales of ProShip and a very small positive currency impact. So on a reported basis, the change is pretty similar to the organic change at minus 12.9%. So moving to slide 10, in customer experience management. After a Q1 at 1%, Q2 went down by 10.6%, leading to a minus 5.5% on an organic basis for the first semester. Recurring revenue represents 77% of customer experience management sales in H1. And you'll see that throughout each of our solutions, a strong recurring proportion of our recurring revenue. And they showed a very good resilience at only a minus 2.5% organic decline. And this is due, obviously, to having expanded our customer base previously and to the continuous increase of SaaS subscription. And it's obviously at the expense of our license sales because it's the 2 options that our customer have. So on the negative side, we recorded a drop on on-site professional services. We have explained that obviously with the lockdown, some project has been delayed, and we also had a little bit less new logos compared to last year in the same period of time. On the license sales, at minus 14.4%, we suffered obviously from the shift to SaaS model, from a high and also from a high comparison basis in Q2 last year. Just want to point that out. In particular for the main European countries and in the international segment that performed very well last year in Q2. On top of this, we obviously have the acquisition of new customers was a little bit more difficult because of the social distancing context. But we have, however, managed to continue to gain, I think, 22 new customers, including in new verticals. As we mentioned, we wanted to go after those new verticals in government, in telcos, and utilities. And by region, I think this is the most contrasting aspect of the performance of CXM in the first part of the year. North America recorded a very strong double-digit growth, reflecting very good business momentum, and also a favorable comparison basis compared to H1 last year. And on the other hand, we have a strong decline on the other region, which was also amplified by a high comparison basis. Now, if you look at August performance, it's been good also, and it's been driven still by North America. So when you look at the charts, our lead generation, but I want to make sure we share this here. Our lead generation process has been impacted by those social distancing measures, and we think that it will continue to impact our short-term sales for CXM when we consider H2. So I still expect CXM to be declining as a result in H2, driven by the continued delay of professional services, some lower license that will naturally be offset by continued increase in our SaaS subscription and maintenance revenues. Moving to slide 11. We enjoyed a slight organic growth in business process automation of 1.1%, reflecting a 4.9% growth in Q1 and a small decline at -2.5% in Q2. Recurring revenue, I want to stress that, we're up 13.2%, and so that 88% of our total revenue for H1 for this solution. Again, we benefited here from the previous rise in our customer base in the previous quarters, combined with a increasingly growing proportion of SaaS subscription. Now, if we look specifically in the COVID-19 context, we continued obviously our marketing campaigns and have further accelerated the acquisition of new SaaS customers in all regions, and in particular in North America. On the other hand, we have recorded a decrease in the volume-based revenue, and in particular for the property management sector in France, which we have explained, I think, at the end of May. But we have seen this trend to start to reverse itself at the end of H1. License sales, even if they represent a small portion of business process automation, were strongly impacted at -43.9%. And this was mainly due to the shift to the SaaS subscription model, but also to the lower traction from our bundles offers, which is one of the synergies that we have across our solution with the mail-related solution in this COVID-19 context. As we place less equipment when you have a software attached to the hardware, that's the natural impact. Moving to slide 12. So if we talk a little bit about Parcel Locker solution, we have obviously to the benefit of the strong organic growth that we have achieved in the first quarter at 27.2%. Our Parcel Locker solution ended the first semester at an organic growth of 9.4%, and so despite the slight decrease that we recorded, 1.9% for the second quarter. So same thing if we look by category of revenue, recurring revenue for Parcel Locker represented now 64% of the Parcel Locker revenue, and this was up 35.2%. Obviously, they benefited from a strong growth achieved in 2019, but also in early 2020 in our Japanese install base, which provide us with a steady rental revenues. But we also benefited in the US from an increasing proportion of lockers generating themselves subscription and maintenance fees, as well as usage-related fees. Okay? And on the end, when we look at the hardware sales, They stood at a minus 18.3% because, and mostly because of delayed installation, right? Due to the social distancing measures, where sometimes it's difficult to be able to schedule installation, and whether it's property managers or university in the US, they've been delaying those installations at times. So, and just as a quick reminder, we did have a pretty high comparable basis for this solution in Q2 last year. So moving to slide 13 and to our mail-related solution. Within major operation, we have mail-related solution that declined organically by 13.9% in the first semester. That 13.9% behind it, we did see a gradual recovery from the lows that we have shared with you in April. Recurring revenue for MRS represented 77% of mail-related solution. They went down by 8.7%. Most of the recovery streams, whether leasing, rental, maintenance, postage financing, or other services, are supported by multi-year contracts and were therefore not affected by the downturn. The revenue from consumables, on the other hand, is driven by usage of the machine and was impacted in that COVID-19 context, even though we have seen some gradual recovery in June and July as the usage started to return. On the hardware sales, they declined by 27.6%. The placement, so here of our new mail equipment, was affected by the lockdown situation, especially in the production mail segment, which is the high end of our own segment, both for mailing system and for those inserters. The decline continued to be far more contained in North America than in Europe. We've seen a noticeable difference between the region. But like in other solution, we also have recorded a progressive rebound in June and July from those low level that we shared with you in April. So this quick review concludes my H1 operational highlights, and I'm now handing over to Christelle for the review of our H1 financial performance.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Good evening and good afternoon. So moving to slide 15, you find here the summary of our H1 performance. So our total sales amounted to 485 million in the first half, i.e. a contained decline of 12.8% compared to last year. Major operation, which contributed about 90% to total sales, decline 10.5% year on year, while additional operations were down 28.9%, suffering from the lower level of recurring revenues in their portfolio. The group current EBIT before acquisition-related expense amounted to 61 million in the first half compared to 93 last year. And looking at major operation, the current EBIT amounted to 65 million, down from 96 million, whereas additional operation EBIT remained overall stable, reaching minus 4 million versus the minus 3 of last year. Moving to slide 16, and as a summary for major operation, we can say that those operations benefited from the resilience of the recurring revenue that were only down 4.5% organically compared to last year. The performance of the three engines was solid in the context, with a combined recurring revenue up 8.1% year on year, driven mainly by business process automation and parcel locker solution, whose recurring revenue grew double digits. Conversely, as Geoffrey explained, the lockdown and the social distancing measures due to the COVID crisis impacted our sales of hardware equipment and license, which were down 25.8% year on year. Looking now at the different geographies, so you see that North America recorded a moderate 6% organic decline year on year and was much more resilient than Europe, which suffered from a 17.6% decline. Indeed, the latter and the lighter social distancing measure combined with the strong double-digit growth in the customer experience solution helped our region North America to better perform than Europe, where we really suffered from tougher restrictions, which weighed on the business activity, mostly impacting our hardware sales and supplies in mail-related solutions, as well as in the professional services activity in customer experience management. Lastly, international organic sales growth was good at plus 4.8% year-on-year, mainly driven by the strong increase of parcel locker solution in Japan, which more than offset the impact of the high comparison basis in H1 last year for customer experience management, which benefited from 2 large deals in Q2. Looking now at the profitability, the current EBIT for major operation was 65 million in the first half, mainly reflecting the lower revenue from mail-related solutions. We will discuss that later on, but active cost management measures help us to mitigate the revenue decline, with 23 million of reduction in operating expense realized during the half, while allowing the group to maintain our continued efforts in investment to support the implementation of our strategic initiatives. Moving to slide 17, additional operation revenue declined 28.9% organically to reach 48 million of sales, reflecting several trends. So first, the lower proportion of recurring revenue compared to major operation, which is around 55% versus 77% for major operation, and also a tougher impact of the social distancing measure on mail-related solutions in the Nordics and in Australia compared to major operation. The impact of the same measures on the graphic business also explain the decrease, as well as on the export activity, which also faced for the latter a high comparable basis in H1 2019, notably due to a significant churn activity last year. Our continued efforts to improve those loss-making activities help us to offset the revenue decline, as reflected by our stable EBIT at -4 million versus -3 last year. Moving to slide 18, here I would like to provide you with a quick update on the cost optimization measure we have been implementing to mitigate the impact of the lower level of activity on our profitability. As already explained when we released our full year results end of March and our first quarter sales end of May, we have launched a number of cost reduction initiatives in response to the COVID-19 impact at both cost of sales and operating expense level. So starting with the cost of sales, we kept having a tight management of our supply chain based on the current activity. And as you remember, we have a pretty variable cost base with 90% of our mail equipment volume and 100% of our automated parcel locker being outsourced. As a consequence, we succeeded in maintaining a stable gross margin over the half versus last year. Regarding the operating expenses, you remember as well that in order to reduce the employee costs, we implemented in all sites partial employment and time reduction measure. This measure concerned approximately 30% of our employees worldwide during the first half and are almost over by now. In addition to the measure we already presented, i.e. overtime reduction, salary freeze, stop of external contractor, tight management of travel and marketing expenses, we have pursued some further effort extending compensation reduction across the group and the launch of a smart working program aiming at streamlining our real estate footprint and promoting remote workforce. On the other hand, the group maintained its R&D and innovation efforts for an acceleration of a new solution deployment to support the future growth. Those measures allowed the group to achieve the 23 million savings before impact of the bad debt to protect our group profitability. Moving slide 19, where you can see a bridge highlighting the evolution of the current EBIT before acquisition related expense between the first half of 2019 and first half of 2020. Several trends explain this bridge. First, 2 million positive impact related to the divestment of ProShip. The 52 million impact resulting from the volume effect associated with the drop in revenue. 2 million slightly negative change in gross margin thanks to our built-in flexibility cost base and our mix effect, and the 23 million positive contribution from the cost saving we already mentioned, as well as the 4 million increase in the bad debt, mainly due to aging deterioration, but with no change as of today in the actual defaults and bankruptcies of our customers. Moving to slide 20, a snapshot of our net results. So the net income group share amounted to 21 million versus 47 in H1 2019. The below current operating income expenses decreased by 6 million versus last year, mainly due to three items. First, the lower interest expenses benefiting from the refinancing operation which occurred in 2019 and 2020. The lower taxes, mainly due to lower profit before tax and specific protective measure adopted in the US, which allowed the group to benefit from tax loss carryback schemes, partially offset by additional restructuring measure we took aiming at optimizing our cost structure. Moving now to slide 21. So you can see that the group enjoy a strong cash flow generation during the half, with the cash flow after capex reaching 76 million versus 21 last year. The group continues to enjoy a high level of profitability in H1 with an EBITDA margin at 21.5%, thanks to our tight cost management. And the EBITDA total 104 million versus 137 last year. We can see also that the change in working capital generated a net cash outflow of 25 million in H1 compared to a net cash outflow of 55 million last year. This mainly reflects the lower level of activity as well as the postponement of some of social and VAT charges to H2 2020 for certain countries. The group recorded as well a higher decrease in its lease receivables, with a positive impact of 54 million in our cash flow due to the lower placement of new equipment in the current context. Interest and tax paid total minus 16 million compared to minus 37 million last year, again, mainly thanks to the positive impact of the refinancing operation and lower tax paid during the first half. Moving to slide 22, where you can see that the level of capex decreased by 10 million versus last year. Again, this reflects the lower investments related to maintenance and reduced investments related to the parcel locker solution in Japan, mostly due to a high comparable base in 2019, as well as in some rented mail equipment. As already emphasized, we strategically decide to maintain our R&D investment around 16 million in order to accelerate the development of new technologies and the launch of new products. Moving now to slide 23. During the first half, the group benefited from a strong cash flow generation, which translated into a significant decrease of the net debt and the lower leverage. Indeed, the net debt decreased by 82 million to reach 586 million. Our leverage ratio, net debt over EBITDA, slightly improved at 2.3 versus 2.4. Excluding leasing, the leverage ratio remained low at 0.8 versus 0.9 at the beginning of the year. The group net debt is backed, as you know, by our future cash flow generated from our rental and leasing activity, 613 million of leasing receivable in our balance sheet, and we expect more than 200 million of cash flow coming from our contractual rental activities, reinforcing the low leverage profile of the company. The shareholders' equity amounted to 1.2 billion at July 31st, and the gearing ratio decreased from 48% to 54% in January 31st. So moving slide 24. The key message here is to remind you that the group has a robust liquidity position of more than 933 million at July 31st, of which 533 million in cash and 400 million in with our undrawn credit line, which is maturing in 2024, as you know. and with no major financing in the short term. As a reminder, you know that Quadient has continued to perform an active debt management policy during the first half of 2020, with a 15 million buyback of our 2021 bond in February, as well as the extension of the maturities of our Schuldschein financial debt for 42 million, as well in February. In September, the group decided as well to proceed with the repayment of all borrowings contracted under our USPP, US private placement, for total amount of $115 million. That is to say that on top of the mandatory repayment of 30 million, which was due in September 2020, we decided the early repayment of $85 million of debt maturing in 2021 and 2022. This operation is the straight continuation of the group policy, aiming at managing the balance sheet in a dynamic way and optimizing our financing resources. The impact of this operation on the group cost of net debt will be slightly positive over the remaining term of the early repaid borrowings, with a 1.8 million cost impacting H2. So as a summary, and as of today, you see that the group benefits from a very robust liquidity position, notably thanks to our business model and the active cost and cash management that we deployed. So, Geoffrey, I give you back the floor.
Okay, thank you, Christelle. So, moving to slide 26. I hope by now that you appreciate that we have a very strict discipline in place regarding M&A and a strong commitment, obviously, to exit from our non-strategic operation, especially the one that are loss-making. Just as a quick reminder, in the past 18 months, we have made the acquisition of Parcel Pending early in 2019, and we recently added YayPay. So on the integration of Parcel Pending, I'm happy to share that the integration has gone according to plan. And as you can see in our strong and continued delivery, that we have delivered a solid growth, strong synergies, and obviously it has offered us the opportunity to also enter new markets with some of the most recent example of some of our contract signature that we just shared with you. YayPay fits very well within our business process automation offering, and I'll take the time to explain why, and clearly expanding into the automation account receivable market was a key objective for us that we shared during our Capital Market Day, and we're happy to have been able to deliver on that with this acquisition this summer. Regarding the reshaping of our additional operation, we are on track with our grow, improve, and exit strategy. We divested Satori Software, Human Inference, and ProShip. We shut down Temondo, and we transferred our international customer experience management business as well as Paxity Japan within major operation, considering the business confidence that we had as a result of what they've done last year. The size of additional operation has been therefore significantly reduced and losses contained. So overall, since the launch of our strategic plan, we paid $120 million for acquisition and divested for a total of $90 million. So that is leading to a net amount of $30 million invested in M&A so far. And we continue, obviously, to screen for additional acquisition opportunities, but with the same discipline and maintaining our same strict financial discipline also, even in this current environment. So moving to slide 27. I'm not going to spend too much time on each one of it. I'm happy to address more questions during the Q&A. Just wanted to give you a brief overview of some of the market trends that we see happening. So on the left side, moving to slide 27, IDC, one of the largest industry analysts, just released a report a couple of weeks ago, indicating that 70% of the small and mid-sized business surveyed are accelerating their digitization rate. And obviously to address the change associated with the pandemic, and the most digitally mature small business will be able, obviously, to respond faster to changing market condition and grow their revenue. And that's obviously saying a little bit the obvious, considering what we have all experienced. Furthermore, the need to help building a remote working environment through digital product is also a top priority for those small and those mid-sized businesses. And it's been closely followed by their need for automation of their business processes. This confirms what we hear directly from our customers, clearly the urgency for them to further digitize their communication, But for many of them, the need is also to drive a stronger customer experience. And companies today don't only compete on product and price, but they compete on the experience and the digital experience also that they give to the customers and the flexibility of the service they give to those customers. There's additional research also associated with the importance of customer experience, especially during the pandemic. Digital experience and customer journey mapping are top priority items as companies must create those deeper and more emotional personalized engagements, and especially through what we call omni-channel digital communication. To give you a little bit more color on the trends that we see for our parcel locker business, moving to slide 28. The COVID crisis has led, obviously, to a big increase in e-commerce around the world. Consumers and many, obviously, even in lockdown, have been turning to online shopping in large numbers. What we've seen from April to June this year in the US is that the numbers of parcels have increased tremendously. USPS saw an increase of 49.9%, almost 50%. UPS reported an increase of 65%. And the surge of parcel deliveries is consistent across the globe. If we look at our own install base of parcel lockers, we have seen the usage increase significantly in parcel deliveries since March, and in particular in the US and Japan, and much faster than the increase, obviously, of the lockers installation. And we continue to hear from our customers and the users the value that they receive from those lockers that they get from Quadient. And we do expect that the shift from e-commerce to become permanent as consumers increasingly demand more flexibility. And while the parcel lockers have increasingly and efficiently addressed the issue, I think, of the last mile delivery, what we see now is that in the environment, where you work from home, and that's a social distancing world that we are all experiencing now, our solution, they also manage to make package collection even safer and more convenient. We move to slide 29. A few business updates that I wanted to share with you for customer experience management. So one of our goals for CXM is to continue to establish strategic partnerships that are more meaningful, obviously, to our customers. So the first one I want to share with you is that Infosys will leverage and supply Quadient solution to provide businesses with our flagship Inspire platform. We'll work together, obviously, with them to jointly develop innovative solutions in the CXM space, and we're going to make demonstration available in their innovation hubs and in Infosys technology. Infosys, it's important because they have an established CCM as a center of excellence, and obviously with our multiple Quadient success stories, including one with an insurance company in Australia. Our second recently signed partnership within the CXM space is with Kitewheel. The goal here is to offer an enriched solution for managing the most important step that we see and the interaction within the customer's journey. And with this partnership, we've got obviously a pretty strong commitment to innovation here, because we think we can deliver a more complete and more robust mapping solution, which is the addition of a unified management of vital customer communication touchpoints and very rich analytics. Last but not least for CXM is that the Quadient Inspire platform continues to receive recognition, obviously, from the leading analysts in the industry. In 2020 alone, we obviously thank all our employees and customers for securing the leadership position in IDC, in Celent, in Novarica, and Inspire. And we were also very excited to get our customers to give Quadient high scores on the Gartner peer review site. It's pretty rare to have only a very positive grade, and so many of them. So as of today, I think that we could say that Quadient Inspire is by far the highest ranking provider in the customer communication management space. Moving to slide 30, and to talk a little bit about business process automation, where we've been fairly active in those recent months. The Quadient team was very busy. We obviously took a lot of time and care to produce Impress, and we did a major product announcement on it. So Quadient Impress, if we take a few seconds together, is a cloud-based and user obviously friendly outbound document automation platform. The goal is to automate customer communication workflows like we've done with Inspire. For the large customers, we're doing that with Impress for the small and mid-sized one overall. It's a comprehensive cloud-based platform, and it provides the flexibility, obviously, to prepare and send or do a batch of transactional documents, right, to customers. And we have the capability to do that through a combination of channels. We could do that on print, we could do that on digital, or it could also be outsourced. And that's where I think we're uniquely positioned with this release. It's a major new offering that we're bringing to the market. So it's a major milestone, and it's obviously fulfilling our ambition in this domain to consolidate and streamline our independent business process automation solution into one platform, whereas before we were covering the same scope but with many platforms. The Quadient Impress suite of application works independently or seamlessly together, right? And it enables the small and mid-sized business basically to future-proof their business so that they could evolve calmly and expand at their own space and easily adapt to the change from physical to omni-channel communication. We've done that organically. We have developed that solution organically, and we have taken to market a major application very quickly and very cost effectively. And we've been able to do that not only because we've got a strong strength in our research and development team, but also because we've been able to re-leverage the investment that we've made in our other solutions, and in particular, Quadient Inspire, which is our award-winning management CCM platform. So since the announcement, we already acquired more than 140 new customers that have been relying on us for their digitalization need, and it helps, obviously, the workforce of our customers to work remotely. We also introduced a new partnership with Premier Inc., which is a leading healthcare improvement company. So in this social distancing environment where virtualization of non-essential staff and no-touch protocols are driving supply chain and all the department heads to seek solutions for document handling and patient communication. The cloud-based application are going to be integrated into Quadient Impress platform, and so they offer healthcare providers basically a very comprehensive solution that saves them time, very simply, reduce costs and errors, and at the end, improve the patient's experience. And last but not least, and I will emphasize that on the next slide, moving to slide 31, Quadient acquired obviously YayPay, a American fintech that is specialized in SaaS and accounts receivable automation solution. So when we talk about YayPay, it obviously expands our business process automation offer, and it's consolidating customer data and payment information from an end-to-end perspective, right, in one platform, and ultimately to optimize the cash flow of our customers. A few information on YayPay. They were founded in 2015. They obviously provide a combination of automated invoice delivery capability paired with the collection management. We're helping customers do the collection, do the credit assessment, because obviously we have a lot of good data to be able to understand how the customers of our customers are paying them, which frequency, which one is late, etc. The payments, and integrating with different third-party here, and all the Cash App solution. And that basically is why we have now a comprehensive single cloud-based platform, and that serve already more than 3,000 users globally. I think that one of the strengths and differentiator of the YayPay solution is that it combines real-time reporting with basically artificial intelligence, and that basically provide companies with insights, and it's super important for them, into the future of how their own customers are going to pay them, and how that could impact their future cash flow. And therefore, I think we could help them reduce their write-off and improving their DSOs, which is the numbers of days of sales outstanding. A few other points I want to share with you on YayPay. It's obviously a team that was mostly based in New York, more than 60 experts we have acquired here, a very digital team, very agile. We are obviously very happy to get them. They're super passionate, and I think they will fit very well into our Quadient family. Just in a nutshell, why did we acquire YayPay? Right? First, the YayPay solution was purposely built for mid-sized to large companies since it is one platform that is easy to use and easy to configure. The second point is that we already begin targeting, obviously, our hundreds of thousands of existing MRS customers so that we could explain the value of the solution and how they can leverage YayPay with their current solution. So I'm talking here about a strategic differentiation on cross-selling into our existing customer base. The third point is that YayPay, obviously, on itself is one of the best platforms we found in the industry. We obviously have been very disciplined at looking at a lot of different players in the market. They've been obviously also recognized and recently positioned as a major player category by ADC. But we felt that they had a very strong platform and technology. The fourth point is that we are currently working obviously with YayPay to establish some strategic partnership, some very known consulting and technology companies, and hopefully we'll continue to make progress on that in the coming months. And finally, and I think it's not the least, right, is that the integration with Quadient Impress that I just took the time to describe to you before really give us, I think, a key differentiator in this market because we're having capabilities across the value chain. So when you look at the document that our customers send to their own customers, as you know, the invoice is already one of the key documents. 50% of the invoice is what goes through our traditional mailing and folders and sorters equipment. So moving to slide 32, the integration of YayPay and Impress basically will help new and existing customers, right, with the automation of their accounts receivable. That 50% of their communication already goes through is processed by Quadient, so we believe we can help those customers that process the invoice now with the AR solution and all the invoice-related communication. Obviously, it's also a solution that has connectors with most leading ERPs and financial systems. So I think we're able to take those outputs and obviously also from a digital perspective what is created to distribute it also in a traditional way and automate the entire process. Moving to slide 33, a few key updates on Parcel Locker business because we've been also quite busy in that area. We heard from customers that they simply don't have the real estate footprint for a standard locker installation. So if you look at some of the pictures, the standard one are pretty large installations. So in June, we have announced a new product line to address specifically the needs of those customers in the market. What we call our new Parcel Locker Lite solution has been proven to be very cost effective. It is battery powered, which is a huge differentiation in the market, which can easily scale to match the parcel volume in specific location in terms of size and different type of requirements, so you don't have just a one-size-fits-all solution. Moving to slide 33. Oh, sorry. Staying on slide 33. The first time, I think we could say, in the history of our Parcel Locker business, our integrated teams did a tremendous job, I think, by simultaneously launching the same product in 4 different countries: the US, Japan, the UK, and France. And I think this continues to demonstrate our team's commitment, right, and our synergies across all our solutions and across all geographies within Quadient. So with our team commitment here, we also very excited to be able to announce and share with you 2 substantial contracts for Quadient. The first one is with Yamato. You know, it's our traditional partner in Japan, who has made a long-term commitment to install 3,000 lockers in 3 years. And I believe that this new contract with them confirms our partnership and validates the market demand for a solution in this country as well. The next one, which I'm really delighted to and welcome to share with you, is to welcome Loves as within the Quadient family. They just announced a strategic initiative to install more than 1,700 parcel lockers nationwide in all their stores by the end of 2021. Loves, as some of you may know, is a Fortune 50 home improvement retailer in the United States and Canada, and underwent a thorough evaluation process, obviously, and selected Parcel Pending by Quadient because I think of our innovation, our thought leadership in this domain, and I think we had a pretty strong shared vision on customer experience. This partnership is significant for Quadient, obviously, and I feel very, very honored by the choice they made. So I encourage you to read the press release by Loves, emphasizing the importance of this initiative for them. So in summary, if we look at those two major contracts, but also a few other recent ones, it's more than 60 million euro in the retail and carrier sectors that is under a multi-year contract that has been signed. In addition to launching Parcel Locker Lite in the UK, we've also launched the parcel pending solution to the UK market. So this is a first and I think major step in the international expansion of parcel pending technology. And obviously we're going to be focusing on the residential and corporate office segments. If we move to slide 34, in June, and we talk a little bit about mail-related solution, we announced the availability of the iX series mailing system and smart mail center management software. That was for the US. This solution is obviously, I think, what we could consider a premier mailing system, and it's designed and built to extend our market leadership, in particular in the mid-range mailing systems. So the iX series with Smart, we could say represent Quadient's most technology advanced mailing system. It enables mail centers to monetize their operation, ship parcels and package within carrier of their choice, track and control expenses, and fundamentally fuel stronger business communication with internal both and external customers. So we do have a challenging market environment for mail-related equipment, but we believe that by launching the iX series, at this moment, it does position Quadient to continue to outperform the competition and go market share both this year and in the future, even in the declining environment. We also recently signed a significant OEM agreement a few months ago with a global mailing equipment company, Frama AG, Swiss-based. This partnership, I think, makes Quadient global manufacturing capabilities available to this player, Frama, and I think it will improve the manufacturing scale and support both companies, obviously, to their ability to continue to serve a customer need in the long run. Quadient and Frama have a strong history of collaborations. There's nothing new, and this agreement represents a vote, I think, of confidence from them in the quality of both our product and our relationship. Moving quickly to slide 35 for synergies. What I wanted to quickly emphasize is what makes obviously Quadient unique in our ability to execute and bring together our core assets, including our innovative technology, our 500,000 customer base, our passionate employees, and the recognition that we have from being market leaders in our infrastructure. So as we became Quadient, one company with one vision and one mission, this has helped us to better leverage these assets to efficiently accelerate our growth solutions. And we have many examples here that we could go through, and they're mostly examples of integration and synergies, whether they are customer-facing, R&D, on the supply chain, on the go-to-market, and across our solutions. Moving to slide 37. If we take a little time now to wrap up and talk about the 2020 outlook. As we already stated, I think thanks to our business portfolio, we are today uniquely positioned to continue to benefit from the acceleration of the shift toward both digital solution and e-commerce booming trends. I think that when we take into account the resilient performance recorded in the first half of 2020, and the revenue trend, I think, is expected to improve in the second half of 2020. This improvement will be driven by the growth in H2 in business process automation and parcel locker solution activities. And as a result, and obviously if we exclude any unfavorable development with regard to the COVID-19 crisis, right, or any worsening of the economic environment that we can obviously not predict in the coming months, we expect for full year 2020 an organic sales decline of around 10% compared to the full year of 2019, a current operating income before acquisition-related expense in the range of 135 million to 145 million, and this is obviously at constant foreign exchange rates in H2 compared to H1. And last but not least, the free cash flow above 100 million. So I think this concludes our H1 presentation, and Christelle and I and Laurent are happy to take your question or to get your feedback.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to submit a question over the phone, you can press star 1 on your telephone keypad. Please ensure your phone is unmuted locally so I can call your name and advise when to ask your question. Again, that's star 1 on your keypad now. And the first question is going to come from Nicolas Tabor of MainFirst Bank. Nicolas, when you are ready, please go ahead with your question.
Good evening. Thank you very much for taking my questions. The first one would be to come back directly on the organic growth guidance for the full year, the minus 10%, which implies, I guess, around minus 7% for the second semester. Could you compare it to the exit rate you had in July and August, so we can have some kind of color of the level of recovery you've seen? And partially, what do you think will be the main drag in H2 for you not to be able to achieve a better performance organically? Because I think the consensus is currently a bit more optimistic than you are in your guidance. Then the second question would be on the government schemes, on what catch-up effect should we expect on the deferred taxes you may have enjoyed in H1? What's the volume of cash outflow that will occur in H2 that did not occur in H1? And same thing for the overall percent of the workforce that is still in partial unemployment and will still be an OPEX relief in the second semester. Thank you very much.
Nicolas, could you just repeat your second question?
The second one is, yes, sorry. The second one was on the government schemes, both the volume of tax deferrals that you enjoyed in H1 and that should be paid in H2, and yes, also on the volume of partial unemployment that you're still benefiting from at the moment.
So I'll take maybe the first one. I'll let you, Christelle, take the second one. Good evening, Nicolas. Happy to discuss with you again after a while. So two good questions. So for the first one, we're not sharing obviously the monthly performance. What we said is that we did see some improvement from the lows in April on the monthly performance. We have shared on the charts the performance of month in 19 versus 2020. So if you go back at the beginning of the presentation, and you could see that the gap versus last year is changing month over month. So you see it's not necessarily linear, but you do see that over time there's obviously some gradual improvements. We have also added August, which obviously August has been narrowing the gap further. So we're continuing to progress on that, and obviously contrasted by solution and by region a little bit in the same trend. So that's, I think, what I could say to give you some more color on the first part of your question. And obviously, this is based on the current trend that we see in August, and based on the projection that we have for the rest of the year, that we have been able to give our guidance for H2. Estelle?
Yeah. So, Nicolas, on the P&L side, I would say on the OPEX and the part of partial unemployment, but I will bundle that with the measure we took in terms of furlough. You can have a global impact of around 6 million that we have as a reduction of OPEX. Regarding the deferral, so more on the cash side, we are rather less than 10 million that will be reversed in H2.
Okay. And therefore, so the deferrals you mean is only 10 million that will come back, and I mean the organic growth guidance is not that aggressive for the second semester. So I was wondering, in terms of the working capital impact and the EBITDA guidance that you have given, why is it the free cash flow guidance a bit higher? Because that would mean you have only 25 million free cash flow in the second semester.
So you're right. We are looking at the free cash flow globally. You know as well that there is a little bit of seasonality there in the free cash flow. So we have to go above the 100 million. We consider that with the improvement of the business, we will have more leasing, and also we have more capex than what we have in H1. So globally, with the impact I just mentioned, that is why that at this stage we are providing this global outlook. And the working capital is also always very complex to define, and you know that we have a January month, which is usually pretty important in our financials.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And the next question will come from Patrick Jousseaume of Societe Generale. Patrick, when you are ready, your line is now open. Please go ahead.
Yes, good evening. Thanks for taking my question. Regarding H2, effectively, when I look at slide number 7 and where the charts are for recurring revenue and for non-recurring revenue for August, it seems that you are pretty close at August to be in August to be, I mean, close to slightly negative organic growth. So effectively, based on this chart, I'm a bit surprised that you give us a guidance which is implicitly -7% on H2. That's my I don't know if it is a question or comment, but second, when looking at where the consensus was for 2020 and 2021 before this publication, I mean, the consensus was expecting obviously significant rebound, I would say, next year versus this year. Are you comfortable with that? And third question, given the current trends, do you expect to have some things to do with goodwill to depreciate or to goodwill intangibles at the end of the current fiscal year, please?
Okay, so I will try to provide you a little bit more. First, good evening, Patrick. So 3 questions. I will try to take the first one and let Christelle respond to the 2 others. So on the first one, yes, on the chart you could see that we are obviously continue to improve the performance in month-over-month, as you could see in August. That being said, I think also in the chart you could see that in our quarterly view, we do have a lot of difference from one month to another, and the third month of the quarter is usually the biggest month for us, as always, and therefore we have to take into account, like we've seen in Q1 and in Q2, so also for obviously Q3 and Q4, that seasonality within the same quarter. And 1 month doesn't make a trend. You have a lot of difference in constructing trends with respect to the full solution and also the different geographies. So I do think that we do have a pretty good view, I think, on that allows us to have a little bit more visibility, which is difficult in this environment, to still being able to project, because we still, as of today, don't have the same visibility that we used to have in our pipeline and our closing rates so far.
So just as a follow-up, Patrick, as what Geoffrey said, so given all this uncertainty, and we have with the team worked to find back, and we did some visibility, I would say, as similar conditions, economic conditions. It's of course we are hoping to have a rebound in 2021, but it's a little bit early to have a real good view and all the different activities and market will evolve. If we continue the gradual recovery as we do, it will be very good. But you should let us a little bit of time to confirm this trend for 2021. On the goodwill side, so as you know, it has been a very important exercise that all companies have done during this semester. So we did as well one exercise. You know that our goodwill is also currently looking at regional level, so we benefit from the full portfolio of the different solutions at each region, and we do not have at this stage any issue with our goodwill. So nothing to note for the moment on this.
Thank you.
And just a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, you can press star 1 at any time to enter the question queue. The next caller will be Jean-Francois Grandjean of ODDO. Jean-Francois, when you are ready, please go ahead with your question.
Yes, good evening. Jean-Francois Grandjean from ODDO BHF speaking. Two questions, please. Could you come back on the ePay acquisition and give us the magnitude of the sales for this new company, and when we want to consolidate it to the group? And my second question, I will come back, sorry, but on the 2021 trends. After I'm a little bit disappointed by the H2 guidance in terms of organic growth or decrease. So, do you expect, or do you think it's possible to come back on an positive organic growth in 2021 or not?
Okay. So I'll take the good evening, Jean-Francois. Thank you for your question. I will take the second one, and I'll let Christelle answer the first one. So on the first one, it's just a reminder, obviously, of the difference in trend and weight of each of our solutions. We do have, as you know, a portion that is important related to our mail-related solution. We have seen some impact on COVID, but like for any other year, it's been a structurally declining business, and we've been able to actually do a pretty good job, I think, last year to reduce the decline. This year, we've seen the impact of COVID in the more important part of the lockdown, and since then, we've seen some continuous improvement. So when you project yourself for 2021, it's going to be important for us to understand what is going to be that new level, and I think once we get closer, obviously, to the end of the year, we will be in a position to understand, hopefully, this pace. And after that, we've got 3 growth engines, each moving at a different pace. As well, you've seen in 2019 we were roughly in the 10% for a little bit above 10% for CXM. We were around the 20% a little less for BPA and 30% for Parcel Locker. And I think it's going to be the same exercise that we need to feel comfortable with. We feel obviously very encouraged today on the midterm trends originating from those markets and those industries. So that's I would say the tailwind that we have, so that's a pretty good sign. After that, we need to look at it by region and by country. We've done a lot of initiatives also this year in terms of launch and penetrating new verticals. So we need to wait, I think, to be able to see how they, in a very unpredictable, I think, environment still for Q3 and Q4, how each one of them will play to be able to respond to your question, obviously about 2021. And after that, for just the performance, I think for H2, we feel pretty strongly, I think, now on those 3 growth engines that we're going to have growth in both BPA and Parcel Locker. For CXM, I think I've shared with you why we think it's not going to be growing in H2, because there's going to be some residual impact on both the lack of pipeline generation in H1, but also the impact on professional services. But the core business in terms of acquiring new customers and the subscription on the platform and the associate license, we feel pretty strong about it. And then obviously, from the improvement that we've seen in Q2 for mail-related solution, trying also to understand how Q3 and Q4 will evolve for MRS.
So, hello Jean-François, regarding the YayPay question and the financials. So you know that YayPay is an early age company and which had huge growth. So in 2019, to have the full 12 months, I would say, metrics, it was recording more than 1.2 billion revenues, but the RRR, which is basically the key indicator for this company, was much more. And in 2019, as well as during the 9 months of 2020, it's growing more than triple-digit growth, so developing extremely rapidly internally. And as we are working on integrating the company as well with Quadient, we are currently leveraging as well our customer base, and we are happy to see that it has already started during the first weeks of H2.
Do we have other question on the call? If not, or in the meantime, we can go to the webcast.
We have just received another question on the phone. This one's a follow-up from Nicholas Tabor of MainFirst. Nicholas, when you are ready, please go ahead.
Hello?
Nicolas,
Tabor, is it possible your phone's on mute?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very sorry. So my first question was on the timing of the Lowe's contract. See, I mean, what's the ramp up you're expecting, and is there some OpEx to anticipate before something comes up in terms of revenue, and how it will compare to maybe Yamato? And then restructuring into H2, do you have any plans for that? Something we should take into account already, that you're pricing, as maybe the top line will not be as good as the market was expecting?
Sorry, I did not understand the last part of your question, Nicolas. Do you mind repeating it on the pricing?
No. I was saying if maybe the second semester is not quite strong as well, does that mean that you may need to do some restructuring as you normalize to maybe a lower level of activity?
Okay. So I'll take the first part. I'll let Christophe take the second part of your question. On Lowe's and on Yamato, the numbers of lockers that we have in mind in terms of installation will be spread for Lowe's at least between 2020 and 2021. We're just at the beginning, obviously, of the ramp up and the launch. And there will be also some recurring revenue once those lockers are installed out of the Lowe's contract. We're really at the beginning of the partnership. So hardware sales split between probably 2020 and 2021, and then recurring revenue on the install base associated to that larger stuff. Then for Yamato, we're talking about 3,000 local lights, which is the new product, different than the standard one we used to have with them. And we have obviously a few years a commitment to be able to install them, and we'll see progressively at which pace do we install those lockers. We're going to start this year, but we have not firmed up yet how much we'll do next year as part of the contract, and potentially 2022 as well. Now, for the lockers light in Japan, they're all on a rental model, as you know, and it's the same type of contract that we have for the local light as well.
Nicolas, on the restructuring, you saw that already in H1 we had a plus 5 million versus H1 last year. So we actually have taken some decision to continue what the company has been doing, I think, for many years now. I mean, adjusting the cost structure to the activity. So it has started in H1, and continue any OpEx reduction effort during H2 as well. And I agree it might also impact or continue to have a risk being covered.
Okay, if there is no other question coming on the call, we can take the question that we have received on the webcast.
We received several questions from the webcast. The first one is from Ron Conan from Value Holdings. Could you give us some insight in the margin development of the four segments, if not percentage-wise, some qualitative answers, please?
So generally speaking, we do not give a specific profitability ratio today. We do give the profitability ratio at major operation and at additional operation, and I think you have seen them in the result that we provided for H1 as well. Generally speaking, and also because of our previous reporting, we have a highly profitable solution with both mail-related solution and CXM. Both of a certain size and maturity and scale. Generally speaking, CXM was included in our EDS reporting and used to be in 2018, I think, above 15% in that segment. And we consider that a solution that is that we are usually improving the profitability. Obviously, it could vary from quarter to quarter, but we have a profitable growth. On mail-related solution, we have obviously for many years, and we have continued to do that, to try to maintain the profitability of a highly profitable business. And then for both BPA and Parcel Locker Solution, obviously we have made investment to ramp up install base, both of lockers, of install base, both in the US and Japan for parcel lockers, for which we're now having a profitable, I would say, recurring revenue from the exploitation of the install base. But we're also accelerating both the R&D and the go-to-market development. So overall, we're investing in Parcel Locker to accelerate the growth. And a similar assessment and comments on BPA. We obviously have in 2019 a pro forma a little bit more than 60 million revenue, growing last year 18.8%, for which we have obviously many customers in our recurring platform with usage as part of that. And we are accelerating the go-to-market and making both investment also in R&D and acceleration of the go-to-market. Second question.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Second question, please. You sold some of your loss-making units on both Parcel Pending and YayPay. Could you talk a bit about their profitability?
So again, we are not disclosing specific profitability, especially within the different solutions. But given the track record of Parcel Pending, we have definitely reaching the good level based on the high level of investment made. Now we have the scale to be profitable very quickly. And regarding YayPay, which is more an investment mode, because again, we are going to leverage the solution to market it, and as you understood, to deploy it on a customer base. We are currently reinvesting in the company on the go-to-market and adaptation to the different countries. So at this stage, this company is still in investing mode.
Thank you, Christelle. Third question. Your leasing portfolio is steadily declining. Do you see, apart from COVID-19 impact, any chance of recover the leasing portfolio mid-term?
So there's two things differently, and that's we benefit from two different trends. We have two different models, the leasing model and the rental. And we usually use those two categories for both our smart hardware overall, which is both for the mail-related solution equipment, mailing and folders installers, as well as the Parcel Locker Solution. And you could see it in the evolution of those business model. In 2019, actually, the future rental has increased, because as we increase more Parcel Locker, it did help compensate for the decline on the rental model on the mailing equipment. And on the other hand, last year, because we're mostly leasing or exclusively leasing almost the mail-related equipment, it did decline, and it did so traditionally for the last few years. So as we're pushing, moving forward, obviously more of our local solution, I think there's obviously depending on the level on the mailing equipment for the rental model, possibilities like we've seen in 2019 that it could offset the declining trend. And on the mailing side, I think we need to differentiate, obviously, the acceleration that we've seen in the declining of the leasing portfolio in H1 because of an accelerated decline in this COVID environment, whereas when we're going to get into a more stabilized and normalized view, we will be able to see, like we've seen in 2019 in North America, where we've been able, for the first time, to see some growth in North America, in particular in our hardware sales. As you sell more hardware, then you have to replace them. Then in that particular situation, it could be possible. But I think it's too early to be able to make any assessment on our midterm evolution on the leasing portfolio.
Yes, I would perhaps just add that what we saw during the last 18 months or 2 years is that we have also within our leasing portfolio some bundle contracts between MRS and BPA, some contracts on the CXM, on the CDP. So in fact, the leasing portfolio is currently diversifying itself as well with the growth of the different activities, because you understood that we are really promoting and trying to develop subscription, SaaS, and leasing rental portfolio to be able to increase the part of our recurring revenues in our total sales. Sorry.
Fourth question, what is the best guess for M&A related expenses for the second half, and what would be the structure optimization cost for H2?
So for the M&A related expense, as they are exceptional expense, we don't have any particular anticipation on those things. I could definitely depend case by case if we do look at the potential opportunities or not, and there's could be potential transaction. So no particular visibility or forecasted amount here. And on the second one, I guess as you're referring to the restructuring cost that we had in H1.
On the restructuring cost, the company has always had in the past an envelope between 9 to 10 million. So what we can tell as of tonight is that this envelope will increase. We will not guide precisely on how it will increase, but as we are already slightly higher in H1, we will pursue our optimization structure during the second half.
Thank you very much. Now a question from Julien Kachka. What is the size of the parcel locker solution today, and what size could Quadient reach in the business in the next 5 years, please?
So our parcel locker solution business was 63 million euro in 2019. At the end of H1 this year, it is 32 million euro. We had a pretty strong organic growth in 2019, above 30%. You've seen the organic growth that we had in H1, which is a little bit lower than what we've seen last year, considering the impact of the current situation. It's difficult to project what it could be in 5 years, because obviously it's one of our core growth engines. We are pretty bullish on, obviously, the market trends and the underlying market drivers of this solution. I remind everybody that when we decided to invest into it, it was a less than 10 million business for us at the end of 2018, before the acquisition we made into Parcel Pending, which is an acceleration. And we do see a potential for acceleration of those trends in different countries. But you also see that we're at the beginning, because we're just launching some of those products for the first time, for example, in the UK. So I think that's a great question to answer, probably later on when we have more visibility in our midterm guidance. What we did say in our Capital Market Day when we launched Back to Growth is that we at least expected at the time each of our solution to be of maturity and size, so we could be obviously having a strong market share in leadership position, and that by the end of the plan, it would at least be all 100 million in size when you do the math, basically. So obviously, we're looking forward to be able, when we will reestablish our midterm guidance, to reconfirm the different numbers associated for each of the solutions.
We have one last question from Anthony Dubois. Regarding the recent weakness of the equity price, your good cash position, and now your implicit expectation for small organic growth in H2, will you consider the possibility for buyback?
We do see some improvement, obviously based on our guidance for the year on H2 versus H1, but not organic growth. On the situation, it's obviously a topic that the board is looking, on a regular basis, and have a strong attention both on the share price and our shareholder return policy. Obviously, in this environment, there's many things to take into account on both the economic environment, the social impact, and making sure that we look at the way we use capital, we do it the right way. There's obviously many options to consider always when we do a capital allocation. including the shareholder return, but also the debt reimbursements, and what is needed, obviously, to make sure we could fund the company organically and do the proper initiatives. So that's obviously top of mind, and any buyback programs are obviously always part of the discussion. I'm sure that the board has on that. So no particular adjustment on the near term.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Thank you, Christelle. I think we don't have any additional question on the phone. So.
Thank you very much all for your time.
Thank you.
Look forward to our next publication call.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining today's conference. You may now disconnect your lines.